Hello everybody, welcome to Macro Talk. It is Tuesday. What's the date? April the 22nd, all evening. And today we're talking about enlarger lenses, something that are not well understood, I think. And we're going to talk about them in just a minute. But first, let me remind you that if you can hear my printer running, that's because I forgot to print my notes off. And I need them. So I'm printing them. But I've got a couple of things to tell you about first. Today we're going to be talking about what enlarger lenses are, how we use them in macro photography, their limitations. We'll talk about the good ones, the bad ones, tell you what to look for, and how to use them. So that's all coming up in the next hour. Saturday, 10 o'clock in the morning, per Zoom. That is a Patreon only meeting we do every other week. Every other weekend, actually, where everybody who supports me on Patreon gets together and we have a chit-chat for 2 hours. And it's fun. And we do a lot of cool stuff. Tangent is this Saturday at 12:30, 12:30, right after Presume. We're going to get with Larry and myself, and we're going to talk about 3D modeling, printing, making things for photography, and so on and so forth. Tangent is for everyone. The invitation is over on my website, https://www.alanwallsphotography.com/blog/enlarge, or just go to my website and find it, or the app, the Walls app. You'll find it there too. I saw a question as I was trying to get this stuff printed from Steve Birmingham. Is it? Steve Birmingham is new to the site, I believe, and he wanted to know about books, books that are worth buying, books that are worth talking about. And you know what? I'm planning on talking about that next week in a live stream. So if you can wait a week, I'll give you the best list I can of all of the books I think you'll like. And yeah, is that okay? Hope so. Hope so. All right, that's everything I needed to talk about. I think it is. What have I forgotten to tell you? Nothing. Okay, so enlarger lenses. What are they? Well, let me show them to you. These are enlarger lenses right here. This is a small selection of them. Some of these are mine. Some are on loan from Robert Wester. They are lenses that are designed to focus a transparency, like a slide, a negative, onto a print, onto a piece of paper. That's all they do. They sit up at the top of a copy stand, not coffee stand, copy stand, and light is shone through a transparency. The lens then focuses it onto the photographic paper so that a photograph can be made. That's how they used to do it before the electron was discovered. And yeah, it seemed like an awful lot of work to me. But that's what enlarger lenses do. They come in a number of different types, different focal lengths, different sizes even. Like there are some of these things that are really teeny tiny. Let me show you one. Look at that thing. That's the whole thing right there. I had to come up with a fancy way to mount it so that I could reverse it. I've been testing these lenses for the last few days. Some of them are good, some of them are absolute rubbish. But that's the way it goes. We've got several that we'll be looking at and talking about. But that's their job. That's what they do. They enlarge a transparency, a slide, if you will, onto a flat surface where there is a piece of photographic paper so that they can make a print. That's what it's all about. So probably the one you're most familiar with is this one, the EL Nikkor 50mm f2.8N. Lovely lens, lovely lens. It's not the best enlarger lens, but for the money, it's pretty close to it. And what this lens does is it makes that image of the piece of film, the transparency, up to 8 times larger. So it's made for printing a pretty decent sized photograph. And what we do in macro photography is take these lenses, throw the whole copy stand away, and use these lenses to take macro pictures, because what we do is our camera becomes the piece of film, and the negative, or the transparency at the top, the slide, becomes our subject, and we use it to magnify our subject, so we can get images at 1:1, 2:1, 3:1, all the way up to theoretically 8:1, though there are limitations, and we're going to talk about those. My notes just stopped printing. I think I made too many of them. It's about the size of a phone book, but yeah, I wanted to make sure I hit all the high points. One other thing I'm going to do is turn off that irritating heater that's blowing hot air onto the back of my neck. Okay, so the things are designed to use with enlargers, and probably the most important feature of an enlarger lens is they are designed to project a very flat image. You know what I mean? If the design of the lens causes the image to not be flat, if it's curved, for example, a little bit, then you can't have the center of the image and the edges of the image in focus on the same piece of film. And you would have blurry edges. If the center was in focus, the edges would be blurry. If the edges were sharp, the center would be blurry. That's because, like our eye, which is designed to project an image onto a very curved surface, some lenses have aberrations. They have they have features that are not necessarily designed into them, but because of the way they are designed, they project an image that is slightly curved. And if it's slightly curved, you cannot make photographs out of it, because then they'd be blurry, like I said. So these lenses, pretty much all of them, certainly all of the good ones, one of the key features is they are really, really sharp across the whole image that they project. And that's why we like them. That's why we use them. It's one of the reasons. So they're optimized for this flat field projection. And that's what you'll hear these referred to as, is flat field lenses. And typically they will give you anywhere from 2 to 10 times magnification. But we're going to talk about that. The thing is, symmetry is something that we touch on every now and again in lenses. When we say that a lens, an enlarger lens, is symmetric, we mean that the light is going to pass through it the same way, whether it's forward or reversed. Now, that's in theory. The fact is that most lenses, most of the expensive enlarger lenses, are close to symmetrical, yet we either use them forward or reversed depending on how they actually perform. So this is a theoretical thing. If the lens is truly symmetric, we probably don't need to ever reverse it. But the truth is, we do, because the pictures look better when we do reverse it. And that's because sometimes the coatings are different on the front and the back of the lens. You'll see an enlarger lens oftentimes has a colored appearance to the front of the lens, and you don't see that on the back element. It's because sometimes lens companies will put more of a coating on the back of the lens to protect it than they do on the front. So that can create asymmetry in a symmetric lens. So sometimes reversing a lens will get rid of the ghosting, the flare that you can get from these coatings. Let me repeat that. I'll only say it correctly. Sometimes when you reverse the lens, you can get rid of the flare that you'll get, or the internal reflections that you can get with these lenses. Sometimes there are little minor issues with the way the lens is designed, so that when it's reversed, the problems are less apparent, because aberrations are usually only corrected in one direction. Now, when a lens is flipped the other way, it may be the same optical formula, but the aberrations may not correct to project the light onto the same plane as when it's the other way around. these are all kind of technical things. The fact of the matter is, if you get a new enlarger lens and you're going to try it out both ways, because oftentimes, even though the manufacturer says it's a completely symmetrical lens, there are reasons that you might want to do it the other way around. Sometimes it's just simply because the aperture is easier to get when the lens is reversed, easier to get to. But whatever your reasoning, check them both ways, because sometimes you'll be surprised. So the bottom line here is that when you test the lens, that is going to trump anything else that you read in books or hear me say. Test it, see which way is sharper. Now, not all lenses are symmetric, and a lot of the ones that we're going to be talking about tonight are not. When they're not, there are specific times that you want to reverse it, and specific times when you don't. Okay, let's talk just briefly about focal length, because it's something that I think might not be really well understood. These enlarger lenses typically run from about 50 millimeters, which is kind of a normal lens, to telephoto lengths up to 150 or so millimeters. Now, the shorter focal length lenses are going to give us more magnification when we use them as macro lenses, whereas the longer ones give us less magnification, relatively speaking, but much greater working distance. That's important, and it's important in how these various lenses are used. Now, in the enlarger world, they used the 50 millimeter lenses to make 35 millimeter negatives, to get good high magnification from a 35 millimeter film. The longer focal lengths were used for bigger film, like medium format and large format negatives, and that is better suited to slightly lower magnification. So if you come across a 150 millimeter enlarger lens, which I don't have to show you here, if you come across one of those, you're not going to be able to get as much magnification out of it. You are going to get a longer working distance, and you're going to get better coverage on your sensor, which might be important if you're using a large sensor camera. There's a rule of thumb to bear in mind, and that is the ratio of enlargement is the image distance divided by the object distance. That's the space between the slide and the film, and the space between the lens, beg your pardon, the object and the lens, and the distance between the lens and the picture you're making. That's how you determine the enlargement ratio. In other words, if it's 8 times further to get to the film than it is to get back to the transparency, then you're 8x. So that's how you figure it out. Don't worry about that. The question I often get is, people will read the manual on an EL Nikkor 50mm f2.8N, and they'll say, well, this thing's rated for 8x. It's rated to enlarge a photograph by 8 times. So we can use it as an 8 times macro lens, right? Well, no, you can't. And that's really the crux of what I want to talk about tonight, is you have to have very good expectations about what these lenses can do and what they can't. But certainly when they're being used in one direction is very different when they're being used in the other direction, when the subject is being focused onto your sensor. 8 times is going to cause problems, and you'll see why in just a second. So there are good enlarger lenses and there are bad enlarger lenses, and you'll see some of all of them. The multi-coated lenses, the ones that have the shiny colors on the front and the back of the lens, you'll see them. You'll know when they're coated. These are good. It improves contrast, reduces flare. You want that. The lenses that are apochromatic are really expensive, but the ones with 6 elements, like the EL Nikkors, some of which have 7 elements, are usually the ones that you want to have. But the apochromatic ones are the absolute best. if you can find them. Terribly expensive. They give you consistent resolution across the whole field and minimal chromatic aberration because they're corrected at the distances that we're using them for. Poor performers are anything that has entry level associated with it. This, and no offense, Robert, I really appreciate the loan of these lenses. This is an entry level Companar from Schneider. It's a lovely little lens. It's very interesting. It's got quite a history to it, and it's absolutely rubbish. Absolutely rubbish. It's I think a 3-element design, and it has softness the whole way around the center, and yeah, color fringing is terrible. Just not a good lens, reversed or backwards. It's a 50mm lens, f4. Don't buy one. So the good lenses then are going to be priced a lot higher, but the EL Nikkors, the ones I really like, are by Nikon, and they're relatively affordable. They're a lot more than when I bought my first batch of them, but you can still get this lens for, I think, $50 used on eBay. Make sure you get the N. The N is the one that has the coatings, and it has a slightly better internal formula. It works really well. Do not buy one of these either. It's a fantastic feeling lens. It weighs about a pound. It's a Resolux by Ross, English company. It looks like it would be fantastic, and it's not. It's not fantastic at all. It's very ordinary, with a lot of softening at the edges. So we talk a lot about reversing lenses, reversing camera lenses as well as enlarger lenses. Now, why are we doing that exactly? Well, the idea is that by reversing the lens, we're aligning the optical path into the direction that the light was intended to go in. You see what I'm saying? Now, as we're not shining light through it to make a print, we're looking through it with our camera to take a picture. We're using it in the same orientation. So many enlarger lenses, especially at 1:1 or higher, when we get into the higher magnifications, they perform better reversed. But I'll go back to what I said earlier. You need to try it reversed, even if everybody tells you not to reverse it. Sometimes you'll be very surprised. Generally speaking, good rule of thumb, if you're going to be at 1x or higher, reverse the lens, unless there is a specific reason not to. If your lens gives you less magnification than life size, if it's less than 1:1, and you'll get this on the longer focal length lenses, it's already optimized by directionally, so there's no reason to reverse it. So for lower magnifications, it's probably best to just leave it the way it is. The mounts are a bit funny with these. They usually have a Leica screw-in mount on the camera end when you're using it forward, so you have to get the right kind of adapter so it'll fit onto your bayonet of your camera. But if you're using it in reverse, they use a fairly standard size 40.5mm, and you can get those just about anywhere, 40.5mm filter thread. So the way we reverse them is you'll notice that the filter thread at the front end of the lens has a thread that you can screw something into. The thing you would screw into it would be an adapter like this, which is 40.5mm, which is the size of the threaded part. It screws right onto the lens, just like so. And then this end will accept one of these things. If I can find one. I don't know what I did with it. I must have put it down. There it is. A bayonet will screw right into that. So you can do it with 1 or 2 adapters. You can mount the lens in reverse or forward. Very easy to do. I've got countless videos on how to hook these things up to your camera, your bellows, your extension tubes, however you're doing it. It's not difficult to do. The beauty of these things is they give you variable magnification, which is something that you don't get from every lens. Now, you can't focus these things. They don't have a focus ring on them. You focus them by moving the camera and the lens closer to and further away from your subject. But by increasing the distance or decreasing the distance between the lens and the sensor of your camera, you can increase the magnification by pulling the lens forward. You can decrease the magnification by bringing it back. So you wouldn't necessarily want to use extension tubes like something like this. You could, but it's a bit clunky, because if you use that and you have too much extension and you can't fit your subject in the frame, you have to take out some of the extension tubes. Whereas if you have a bellows, you can just shorten the extension and look in real time and see your subject shrink on the field. This is why I love the Enlarger lenses as much as I do, because they're incredibly sharp, incredibly flat, incredibly bright, and they resolve well, and they do it all with a variable magnification that I can change on the fly at any time. When I'm using these lenses, which I often do in the studio, I'll change the length of the bellows continuously. I mean, every shot I'll slightly lengthen or shorten the bellows to get the composition that I'm looking for. Knowing that within the range that I use it, and we're going to talk about that in a second, I'm always going to get the ability to frame my shot exactly the way I want, without having to go hunt for different lenses and microscope objectives and everything else. So it's the most versatile, most comfortable way for me to take photographs of anything in the studio between, say, 1x and 3.5, maybe 4x. Now, if the thing can magnify 8 times, why am I not saying anywhere between 1x and 8x? Well, there are problems when you start exceeding the amount of extension you're going to have to get to 3.5 times. And that is, as you move this Enlarger lens further and further away, and actually we'll do an experiment, come to think of it, as you move it further and further away from the sensor, the aperture, which you're going to be using fairly open on these lenses, will start to get really small. See the aperture there? I'll try to keep it straight. Okay, so that's the aperture fully open. You wouldn't use it that way because aberrations creep back in. So we'll close it one click to F4, I think. Yeah, we're at F4. Now look at this. That's when it's right on the camera. But as you start to add extension, see how small that aperture starts to get? Of course, this is exaggerated, but the fact is that as you pull back the bellows and get more and more magnification, you're getting a smaller and smaller effective aperture. The hole that the light is getting through is getting smaller and smaller as far as the sensor is concerned. And that's all we care about, is what the sensor thinks. Because as the hole gets as small as it does at, say, 150 millimeters, a process called diffraction sets in. Diffraction being it's a function of light passing through a hole, any hole. The light is going to be altered as it comes up against the sides of the hole, and the smaller the hole, the more of the light gets affected. The result is the image gets soft around the outside at first, and then all over. Now, diffraction softening is something we have to live with, because every camera's got an iris in it, so the light's always going through a hole, and every image is affected by diffraction to some extent or another. The issue becomes when that diffraction, when the apparent size of the opening in the lens becomes so small that the F number goes up above about 20, say 16, 20 and above. Once you get into those kind of numbers, the hole is so small, the image looks terrible. It really does. So closing down the aperture is not an option. And the reason that's no issue for us is, of course, we're focus stacking. So we can leave the aperture wide open, and we can move it fairly far away from the sensor, but keeping it wide open, we have a shallow depth of field, and we can focus stack and get our image completely in focus. And that's the whole point of high magnification photography. That's how we do it. But we were talking initially there about reversing the lenses. So for higher magnifications, when we're doing this, you want to reverse the lens. You want to keep the aperture fairly wide open, and you're going to be focus stacking. Just count on it. Now, what is the purpose of using a longer, let me find a longer lens. Why would you use, instead of a 50 millimeter lens, why would you use a 105 millimeter lens or a 75 millimeter lens? What's the point of that? Well, the point of it is, of course, that you get less magnification. There can be a considerably longer working distance. The distance between the lens and the subject will increase, just like it does when you go from your 90 millimeter macro lens to your 200 millimeter macro lens. You can be quite a bit further away from the subject and get the same kind of composition. So it gives you more room to work, more room to get light in, and there is definitely a reason to have one or two larger enlarger lenses, longer enlarger lenses in your armamentarium. I don't use them a whole lot because I love the 50 millimeter for the framing it gives me. It's about the perfect lens for me for macro photography, and a lot of the longer ones are a bit more expensive, which is the other thing, because I'm pretty cheap. So you have to remember, these are not camera lenses like a macro lens that you might have. They have a fixed aperture that is manually operated. Even this little bitty thing, I think it works. It worked earlier. Hang on. I may have broken it, Robert, in which case I'll have to buy you another one. No, it's not broken. So they have a manual aperture, so you're going to be opening and closing the aperture by hand, which is what manual means. So you're going to want to set this up in such a way that you can reach the filtering. This was very difficult to mount because of its teeny tiny size. I found a way to do it, but I couldn't get to the focus, to the aperture, which was a problem, but not to worry about. So the longer focal length lenses give you a narrower field of view. You know how that is. When you're using a telephoto lens, you have a more reach, but you have a shorter, a smaller image circle. You have a smaller scene that you're composing in. It's exactly the same with these longer and larger lenses. There is quite a bit less field curvature. And now I know I said these are flat, but if you were using a cheaper, longer enlarger lens, it would have quite a bit less curvature of the aberration of field curvature than the short ones do. The shorter the lens's focal length, the more likely it is going to have some curvature, especially in the inexpensive lenses. Obviously, these things don't have stabilization. They don't have autofocus. They're just glass lenses. So you're going to be focusing by moving your camera forward and backwards. So you're going to need a rail. There's no focus ring to adjust on this. Most of them are not apochromatic, but the corrections in these lenses is really, really good. It's enough to make them really pretty sharp. I do not own an apochromatic enlarger lens. One day I hope I do, but they are really costly. I'm sure that Joseph has several, They are to be lusted after, that's for sure. Bear in mind that you get limited coverage with Enlarger lenses when it comes to big sensors, and the longer your focal length lens, the better coverage you're going to get, the bigger the image circle. And it can be a problem when you're using really pushing the magnification on a shorter focal length Enlarger lens on a full frame camera. So just be aware of that. These lenses are perfect on bellows. In fact, 90% of the time, this is what I have on a bellows. Either this or a prime camera lens. Usually this. It's perfect for me. There is a sweet spot for any of these lenses, both in terms of magnification and the best performance aperture. They all have very limited ranges where they're really, really good. I think that the magnification sweet spot in the 50mm lens that I like so much is about between 2.5 and 3, and I leave the aperture on 5.6 usually. That's proven to be the sweet spot for me, at least with the 2 copies of the lens that I have. Sometimes there's variability between the copies, and you may get sharper images at f4 or f8 even, but it's a very good bet that if you get one of these and it's not obviously got fungus growing in it or pieces of glass clattering around inside, that you're going to have a lens you'll be using for the rest of your macro life. And yeah, they are absolutely fantastic. Even if you can only get your hands on one of the old 50mm f2.8s, this is, I think, a fantastic lens too. You just have to be careful with flare. So what are the most desirable lenses? If you're going to go on eBay tonight and look for Enlarger lenses that you'll keep for the rest of your life, Rodenstock makes an APO Rodagon. It's the Rodagon N 80mm f4. It's one of the absolute best lenses for 1 to 3 times magnification. I'll look forward to seeing what you guys think about that. Does anybody have one of these, the APO Rodagon? I think they're really pretty hard to find these days. The other star that I think people are very excited about is the EL Nikkor 80mm f5.6. It's in the same style as this. I do not have one of those either. They are not easy to find, but they are very highly corrected. They're small and light like all the EL Nikkors, and as long as you keep your magnification down to about 2x, they are really, really nice from everything I've heard. The Schneider Kompanon, not the Kompanar, the Kompanon, the S, 50mm f2.8. It's kind of like the EL Nikkor. It's sharp across the whole field and has wonderful contrast, and it is perfect to reverse and use at high magnifications. If I had one of those, I would probably push it beyond the 3.5x that I stop at. A couple that my research showed up, and I talked to a couple of people who have these, the Minolta CE Rockor 50mm f2.8. I have never actually laid my hands on one of those, but I hear they're really, really nice. Very flat field, very bright, very contrasty. Do you have one of those, you guys? A Minolta? Maybe Joseph does. Half the APO Rodagon line is fake APO. Same number of elements as conventional lenses, just slightly different computation. That's from Joseph, and that may well be true. I don't know. I certainly have tested a lot of optics that are supposedly apochromatic and only have 2 elements in them, so pretty sure they aren't. The Fuji EX 75mm f4.5 is known, apparently not by me, but I heard that it's much sought after. I have never heard of the Fuji Enlarger lens, but I'm going to be looking for one tonight. There's also the Meopta Meagon S, another 80 millimeter f2.8. Apparently very good. A lot of coin guys use that, and yeah, it's apparently a very nice lens. So go for the newer lenses that have coatings. That's always going to help. And if you have any way to test the lens on extension on your camera to make sure you get good field coverage, do it. Test it before you buy it. You often won't be able to, of course. And buy from a good seller. All right. So Enlarger lenses then they're everywhere on the internet. You can find them at eBay for very reasonable prices. They're very accessible. They are very dependable, predictable. They give you a nice bright field, a flat field, as we've talked about. And to me, I called them the missing link in the title for the live stream because they fill a gap between your macro lens or whatever lenses you're using on the camera and your microscope objectives. They fill a gap that is not otherwise well filled. Now, somebody is going to say, but what about my Canon MPE 65 or Leoa 2.5 to 5? Yes, these lenses have a role, and under certain circumstances make really nice pictures. But when it comes to a standard workhorse, these things are a fraction of the price and completely reliable. I don't use these outdoors. I've never used them outdoors. I know a lot of people who do, but I would be more inclined to use, I think, the variable magnification camera lenses on a tripod under controlled circumstances out in nature than I would one of these. These are too precious to take outside anyway. So I talked earlier about diffraction, the softening that you see as the F number increases. Right. It pretty much sets the limit for resolution as you push the magnification higher and higher. So the impact of diffraction scales linearly, well, probably not linearly, probably exponentially with magnification. So the higher your magnification, the more likely you're going to run into problems with diffraction. So the really, really short lenses, like 35 millimeter up to about 50 millimeter, these are the short focal length Enlarger lenses. They are not commonly found. They aren't used that much. They give a lot higher magnification on any given extension, and they're small and compact and light. But high magnification, which happens right away, they require teeny tiny apertures if you're going to get anything in focus, unless you're focus stacking. And the diffraction becomes really severe really quickly. As soon as you move that f8 or f11 lens away from the sensor, everything goes soft. So at any kind of reasonable magnification, you're going to see diffraction with the shorter focal length lenses. Now, with the longer lenses, say 80 to 150, you get the longer working distance, and the shallower angle of view reduces the likelihood of getting distortion, like field curvature. Everything is slightly easier to keep flat and in focus. And because you can have a larger physical aperture on the lens at the same F number, I'm not going to get into why that is. You have less diffraction at the same aperture as you do with the shorter lenses. The trouble is that to get any kind of meaningful magnification, you do need a lot more extension. So the rule of thumb is don't use these longer lenses for higher magnification. They become ungainly. And they're really not intended to give you much more than 3 times magnification at the most when you're up in the 100, 150 range. And even if you do have the longest bellows in your neighborhood, that's not really going to help when you're moving the aperture further and further away from the sensor. So the bottom line is that the long focal length enlargers can shoot at slightly higher f numbers with less diffraction than you get from the short ones, but don't take it for granted. Okay, so if we were to look at come to think of it, a good example would be the EL Nickel 50. If we were to look at this lens, it can get you up to 4 or 5 times magnification fairly easily. But when you have the f-stop at 5.6, your effective aperture becomes 33.6, because the formula is magnification plus 1 times the f number that you set on the lens, and that will tell you what the effective f number is, and that's all that matters, because that's all your sensor can see. With the APO Rodagon, the 80 millimeter, you only get 2x magnification, but your f-stop of 5.6 only becomes 16.8, the effective aperture, because you don't have as much extension, and the risk of diffraction is considerably lower. If you go all the way up to 135 millimeters with a Companon S, they have a 135 millimeter lens, that will give you 1-to-1 with a big long working distance, but your 5.6 f number becomes only 11.2, so there's very little risk that you'll have any diffraction at all. So there's a trade-off. That's like everything else in macro. Everything is a trade-off. Use shorter focal lengths if you need to get more magnification. Shoot wide open or stop down just a click or two, and focus stack. You're always going to have to focus stack unless there's never enough depth of field with these lenses. So use your longer focal lengths when you want just a little bit of magnification, say 1-to-2. And you can stop down a little bit more aggressively and not have to worry about diffraction. I was going to show you a chart, but I'm going to run out of time, so I'm going to skip the chart. It's very boring. It's got colored lines on it, and it tells you that your diffraction limited resolution changes with your aperture. Okay, you knew that. All right. So what I wanted to do now, briefly, far too many notes here, is talk about why enlarger lenses eventually break down. Not break down as in fall apart. Why, as you push the magnification, you get to the point that you need to be doing something else. They run out of steam. These lenses are optimized to print at 2 to 10 times the size of the image that they're enlarging. And when we reverse them, and we're using it as a magnifier, we get aberrations start to creep back in, and field curvature as well, though not usually with the lenses that we choose. But chromatic aberration, even in apochromatic lenses, becomes noticeable when you start pushing the magnification up beyond where it needs to be. Think about it this way. The lens is very beautifully designed to correct the light such that it will focus onto the paper that you're making the picture out of. Same thing when you turn it the other way around and you're focusing the image on your sensor. As when you pull that you pull the extension further and further out, you move the lens further and further away from the sensor, you do get more magnification. But the corrections, the lens elements in here that are designed to line up the colors properly, can no longer do that as we push it further and further beyond where it wants to be. So for me, that's a 4x with the 50 millimeter. That's too much magnification, and that's when I start to see a lot of chromatic aberration and some field curvature come back in. So bear in mind that there are limits, and there is the diffraction bottleneck, of course, that eventually with higher and higher magnification, your lens is getting further and further away from the sensor, and you're going to see diffraction. So when does it make sense to put your enlarger lens down and get a microscope objective? This is a question that I get asked all the time. If you are above, in my opinion, about 4x, you should be using a microscope objective. And because they're made for that. They are made for higher magnification. They're made to project a completely flat image onto the sensor of your camera, because you want the whole thing in focus. So microscope objectives are designed very differently, and they are perfect for shooting that requires high resolution because of their fixed numeric aperture. It's complicated why it works, but microscope objectives are made solely for this purpose. We're using these outside of their design envelope in many ways, but not so with a microscope objective. When we put a relay lens on it, we're basically building a microscope, an infinity corrected microscope. So whenever you want to shoot anything at 4 times magnification or higher, get a microscope objective. You can get a $25 Amscope 4x finite objective and put it on some extension tubes like this, and you can have an incredibly fun time with a very sharp little lens, and it'll do better than any of these enlarger lenses reversed. So it's all about that numeric aperture. The higher NA, the more resolution. Simple as that. You can never even begin to approach the high NA, high numeric aperture resolutions of a microscope objective with one of these, no matter what you do. These are great inside that envelope of usefulness, but when you push it beyond that, it's just not going to do it. So the objectives are designed to give you edge to edge, margin to margin sharpness. They are all, even the cheap ones, are designed to give you flat field. In fact, when you see the letters PLAN on your lens, plan, or semi-plan, or anything plan, that means the objective is designed to project a flat image, just like these enlarger lenses. APO objectives are more common than APO enlargers, and their color correction is superb. I mean, really superb. The apochromatic Nikon lens that I just got is fantastic, and of course the Mitutoyos we like so much. And we're going to talk a minute in these last few minutes about tube lenses, because something that we never talk about is stacking these lenses. A friend of mine, Nick, has been doing a fair amount of stacking with these lenses. I wanted to review some of that so that we could, well, we'll do that now. Adding a relay lens to an enlarger lens is not something you will have heard me talk about, because I usually don't do it. I think it's probably because I don't really have the lenses that would work well together. But it's not like using just a bog standard relay lens with a microscope objective. You can get away with using just about any 200mm lens. Some better than others, of course. But when you're using a relay lens with one of these, it really has to match this lens. It has to work with it. There are several reasons people will use relay lenses. One is to extend the magnification a bit while maintaining good image quality. You know, I was saying that as you move further and further away from the sensor, the image quality drops as your effective aperture goes up. Well, you can kind of trick the camera, well, not trick the camera, you can redirect the light in such a way with a relay lens that you can actually stretch the magnification out a little bit if you're using another lens. You can also improve field flatness at higher magnification, and even make the lens kind of quasi-telecentric if that's what you need. So it can often make a pretty good difference, providing you have the right lens, and it's just not any lens that will do. So if you're using extension, which is always the easiest way to go, you're just taking this lens, reversing it, and extending it away from the sensor to get more magnification. When you're doing that and you're above about 100 millimeters and the image quality is just falling, that's when you might want to think about whether or not there is a relay lens that might help in that situation. So when you're pushing your lens a little hard and it's just not working for you, if you see a vignette, that's another time to think about a relay lens. If you get loss of contrast and softening around the edges, maybe a relay lens will help there. So using a well-matched relay lens, I'm going to give you some examples of that. You can refocus the image more sharply onto the sensor than it would have done if the light had just continued to spread out. You can flatten the field, and you can reduce the softness around the edges. So this is about the only circumstance where I think it would be reasonable to push this lens up to about 5x. You could, and it would probably take a relay lens. But the fact is, I have a Mitutoyo 5x that takes really nice pictures, so I'm not sure I'd want to go to all the trouble of doing that. But if you're we won't talk about telecentricity right now because it gets a bit confusing, but that is one of the reasons that you do it. In a telecentric system, when you're measuring stuff and it has to be very precise, the light moves in parallel rays, so you don't get distortion from the diverging light rays. Big old lenses, very expensive, but a carefully picked relay lens can make one of these behave more telecentric. Okay, if you want to be able to manipulate the magnification more than you would with just extension, sometimes using a relay lens will help. But you have to match the subject scale, and the sensor and everything has to be just right. You have to know what you're doing before you put the combinations together. So let's talk then about when you wouldn't want to bother using a relay lens, which is most of the time. For basic macro, you don't need a relay lens. It just is going to complicate everything. If you're operating between 1 and 2 times magnification, forget about it. Don't even think about a relay lens. It's not going to help. If your Enlarger lens is one of these apochromatic, highly corrected flat field lenses, one of the $1,000 ones, you don't need a relay lens. It is going to be about as good as it gets right out of the box with just air between it and the sensor. If you're trying to maximize your light efficiency, if you have a fairly dark field and you don't have any light to spare, don't use a relay lens. It will eat some of the light for sure. And if you're trying to keep your setup light and portable for any reason, yeah, don't add another lens. It's not going to give you a really marked difference most of the time. But when you do decide you're going to try a relay lens, match the focal lengths carefully. If your primary lens on the front is 50 millimeters, then a relay lens of 100 millimeters will give you 2-to-1 magnification. So that's 2-to-1 magnification at the intermediate image between the lenses. You stop down the relay lens to improve performance, but just a little, just a couple of clicks. There is a problem if the entrance and exit pupils are mismatched, meaning if the apparent openings in the lens are poorly matched and they're too far apart, then you can get vignetting and internal reflections and all kinds of things that just make it an unsuccessful experiment. You really want to use high quality lenses for your relay lenses, and they need to have good coatings and they need to be fairly modern if you're going to get the best results. and you need to flock the whole system if you're doing that, if you're using a relay lens. So when should you use a relay lens? Maybe if you're pushing to 3 to 5 times magnification on a reversed lens, it might give you some advantage. If you're trying to go higher than 5x, then you know, the only advantage then is going to be this thing will give you enough coverage to cover a full frame sensor, probably. If you're using your system to do scientific measurements, then you might want to consider getting a relay lens so that your system can be more telecentric and you're not getting artificial measurement issues from the lenses. But if you're just doing basic stacking on a crop sensor camera with an enlarger lens, you don't need one. Don't spend the money on it. Don't get one. They are really expensive. The Schneider Companon S that we talked about, the f2.8, is great when it's paired with a Rodenstock Rodegon 105 f5.6, and that will be your house payment, or 3 house payments to get that. I'm just not sure that they are both flat field corrected, of course, and the Rodegon is a fantastic relay lens, but yeah, it's a lot of money, and that will give you full frame coverage. Another one is the EL Nikkor 80mm that we talked about earlier, the f5.6 reversed on a Nikon 135mm f3.5Q. You've heard of that lens, I'm sure. We've talked about it before. It's a great relay lens for this and for using short focus with microscope objectives. It's a very flat, contrasty lens, and it works really well with either that Nikon or there's a Rodenstock that also works with it, 150mm Imagon, something like that. I am a gone in just a minute. Anyway, there are loads more combination lenses that don't work, and I think that using any zoom lens as your relay is not going to work. It introduces so many aberrations. It's guaranteed not to do well. There are a few other really good enlarger and relay lens combos. I'll put them in the article on my website. None of them are cheap, and they're all pretty effective in a narrow range of magnifications. Somebody's going to ask, is there a relay lens that works well with the 50mm f2.8? Yes, there is. That Rodenstock Rodegon 105 5.6 works great up to, you can push this lens up beyond 4x. The Nikon 105 f4, the micro Nick, or the manual focus one, I should have pulled it out of the cabinet. That's good up to about, gosh, I guess about 4.5 times. The Minolta Rocore 100mm f3.5 macro lens is a great relay lens for the 50, and the Olympus OM Zoico 135mm lens, fantastic with the 50mm f2.8. So don't use a zoom lens. Don't use fast primes. Don't use anything that has, you know, an aperture max of more than 1.8, or for that matter 2.8. Yeah, you just you won't be happy with it. So I tell you what, we're out of time. I'm almost out of air, and all I needed to talk about was vignetting. I think we'll save that, and I'll do some Jeopardy questions on the subject when we meet on Thursday. So we're out of time. I'm sorry I didn't get to your comments. I will read them now. It's an interesting subject. These things are not as simple as they look, but if you don't have one, get one. It is, I was telling this to somebody the other day, more of the pictures in my portfolio were taken with, not that, this lens, than any other lens that I own, including macro lenses and microscope objectives. More of them were taken with a 50mm f2.8 N enlarger lens. I love it, and you will too. Just try not to get too unconventional with it. Use it on a little bit of extension. Keep your magnification under 3.5. If you need to go to 4x, buy a microscope objective. If you're adventurous, try relay lens, and don't blame me if you're unhappy with it. I'll see you on Thursday. Thursday we're doing Macro Jeopardy for the first time ever. It's going to be absolutely brilliant, I think. The questions are anyway. and it'll be fun. It'll be fun. So show up on Thursday and we'll have a good laugh. Otherwise, presume Saturday, tangent Saturday. It is 1 minute past 9. I'm going to turn into a pumpkin of some kind if I keep talking. So you guys take care, stay safe, and be well. And I will see you on Thursday. Adios.